William Clouston is here. He's the leader of the SDP. William, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
It's an extraordinary time we find ourselves in. I thought that the Labour government would sort of disintegrate before our very eyes quite quickly. I didn't realise quite how quickly it would happen.
Yeah, I predicted the same, actually. I predicted some time ago that within about a year the Labour government would be about the most unpopular government we've had, and I'm sure that will happen. I think they're quite incompetent. I think Starmer's reaction to this, while I applaud his condemnation of the violence and the riots and the looting and the attacks on the police and other citizens, I think his tone is wrong, as many other people have commented.
It's been incredibly badly handled, it seems to me, and every time he speaks, he seems to make it worse. You know, it's hard to believe, and I said this earlier in the show, that he's so bad at being Prime Minister. I mean, leadership is something which seems to have completely and utterly escaped him.
Yeah, we saw very little of it. It's interesting that there were various bouts of civil unrest prior to this. You had incidents at Southend and Bangladeshi conflict in London and so on. And the Hare Hills riot, and there was no press conference. And then when he was forced to do a press conference, the first one, I actually timed it. Did about a 2-minute speech and then 2 questions and then cleared off. That's not leadership. You're not going to bring people together. You're not going to stop this until he acts as a proper Prime Minister.
Right. And we knew, I think those of us who've been through this before, this kind of civil unrest, you could tell in the very early part of last week that this was going to run for a while. And it was certainly going to run into the weekend. I mean, I did a show on Friday and I said, you know, I think this is going to be a very challenging weekend for the government because it's clear that there's an awful lot of stuff that's going to go on. And so it proved. But the only people who didn't seem to expect it were the government.
Yeah, no, it's sad. It's very sad. I've experienced it personally myself. I lived in Birmingham for 4 years in the 80s, and I actually lived in Handsworth in the year that the riot happened. And it made a big impression on me. You know, in that riot, 2 brothers were killed, burnt alive in the post office. Tragic. Yeah. And a lot of people have got to realise that this type of civil unrest, civil disorder, can get out of hand, and it is a risk to life and limb. It's literally the idiots that are throwing bricks and lighting fires have got to understand that you can kill people doing this. So it's very dangerous. But you know, as I say, I totally condemn this. I think we've got to get control. You know, the government's got to get control of the streets rapidly. What we could do with, Mike, actually, and history proves this, is actually some rainfall in the evenings. That would help. But no, I mean, we've also got to be honest in a broader sense. I think this is something that Starmer could not even address. His type of politician can't be honest about what we have in front of us, which is that the world that we live in now has been created by people like him. Yeah. You know, his party instigated mass immigration, which is an experiment really, and they failed to listen to people's concerns about that. And things like the small boats fiasco, which we've talked about many times on your show, that saps people's confidence in the government. Many people who are out there protesting don't believe that the government has their back.
Right. But also, you've just got to look at how the Labour government is dealing with all of this. I mean, we've got Jess Phillips yesterday, the Home Office Minister, actually tweeting out that there's a reason why young men, Muslim men in gangs are roaming around in Birmingham because they're fearing that they might be attacked by far-right thugs, as if that makes it OK. And then having done that, there's no police anywhere to be seen while they go on the rampage, beating people up, smashing windows of cars, looking for white people to injure. And then I spoke to a guy called Mohammed Amin earlier on in the show, I don't know if you heard, who was more or less kind of denying that it was a problem.
No, it's certainly a problem. And our political class and parts of the media have grave difficulty in noticing what everyone else can see.
Well, no one else is even talking about Birmingham this morning. I mean, obviously, I'm not listening and watching to other media, but I'm told by everybody who's listening and watching me that nobody else is talking about it. We just had Paul with a voice note before you came on saying that his wife has to drive through parts of Birmingham, which she's now terrified to drive through.
Yeah. No, I mean, that incident, again, it's one of those things that you hear first sometimes on social media and you hear last from the BBC or the establishment media if they ever refer to it. And in that case, I don't know, and I'm not going to definitively say because I don't know, but there looked to be a distinct lack of policing at that pub where a group of young Muslims came along, and there was trouble, and the police were not in evidence, which is a problem.
Exactly right. And again, you know, you asked the question of Keir Starmer about two-tier policing, and he bats it away and says it's not an issue, it's not worth discussing, it's something which is conflated and cooked up by the far right who are trying to destabilise our country. You asked Sir Mark Rowley, the head of the Metropolitan Police, and he knocks the microphone out your hand.
Well, that was a disgrace. I mean, again, he's got to control his temper there. And also, he's got to be able to address questions that are put to him on this. You know, again, many of us have observed, not just in the recent events, but previously, that when BLM wanted to do protest during lockdown, they were allowed to, nothing happened. 22 police officers were injured in some of those incidents. And again, nothing to see here, largely peaceful, which is a joke.
Right.
No, people get it. But actually, it's broader than that, Mike. A lot of people fear not just two-tier policing and the state not treating them on a par, but we're having to live with this dreadful imported racial favoritism from the United States. And there is two-tier policing, clearly, but there's also two-tier employment practice, there's two-tier university admissions, there's two-tier attitudes towards culture and advertising and the rest. Everyone can see it. It's clear as air.
Yeah. I mean, this is the point. We've been talking about this for so long, and it's as if these people haven't been listening. You know, they've not been listening to us. They've not been listening to their own constituents, if they're politicians. They've not been listening to community groups. They've only really been dancing to one tune, and we all know what tune that is.
Yeah, and that's the most dangerous thing. So I retweeted a quote, one of my favourite quotes from my political hero, Peter Shaw, who was a Labour trade minister, a very wise man.
Yeah.
He said, if politicians don't listen to people and sideline what they believe, what their desires are, people will resist, and you'll get unrest of this type. He predicted it, and you can't. I mean, I promise you, Mike, the reaction to this, we put in our press release, in the SDP press release, you've got to get control of the streets first, but you've also got to stop the boats, and you've got to stop this. You've got to cease this experiment in mass immigration, which is causing British citizens not to be trained for the work we need, and is actually harmful economically and socially, and they've got to stop it. But will they stop it? I very much doubt. That their reaction to these things is always to double down and disrespect the people that are making the points. Obviously, there is a far right. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the people on the streets are thugs, but I'm sure a core of them are blood and soil nationalists of the type they describe. But the general public, the mass of the general public, are against mass immigration. That's what the data says. And the academic you got on from St Andrews, I think, was just wrong about that, I'm afraid. He ought to know.
He was completely off the pace on that. Absolutely right. William, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. William Clouston, there, leader of the SDP.